I spent over 50 hours thrifting, and this is the hourly rate from what I was able to find. So first in this video, we're going to talk about how much time I spent and what that actually involved. And then we're going to talk about the potential profit, how much profit I sent into Amazon, and my thoughts on that as well. So I spent a little over 50 hours. Actually, it ended up being 56 hours and 15 minutes. This includes the driving, the sourcing, checking out the items, driving back home, and I decided to include the listing of these items as well, because you really don't make any money unless you list the items. So here are a few thoughts that I have about how much time you actually spend on thrifting these items. It feels like oftentimes people say, okay, I've sourced the item, and they just like act as if they've already made that money. But in reality, there's a lot of other things that go into a reselling business than just finding the item and listing the item. Like for example, this hourly doesn't include any repricing. It doesn't deal with the stranded inventory. It doesn't account for dealing with any account health issues. It doesn't deal with bookkeeping. And so there's other tasks in the business that end up taking time. And so saying that I found these items and I listed this item and that's my hourly and that's all that there is to consider is just not enough to consider there. So just for the sake of example, we're going to add another 3 hours per week on for those types of tasks. In reality, it's probably higher than that, but for this video, we're just going to tack on another 3 hours per week. And so with another 3 hours per week, we are going to end up taking that into the final consideration of how much hourly it was at the very end. So now that we've talked about how much time I spent and what that actually involved, now we're going to talk about how much potential profit I found and then the hourly of it. In that 56 hours and 15 minutes, I ended up finding $4,984 of potential profit. The way I calculate this is if I think I could sell something for $100, that's what I listed it at. I think that's reasonable. Whatever that potential profit is, I count that in this big final calculation. And so there is a possibility on some of these items that competition comes onto the listing and I have to sell it for 70, 80, or 90 instead of the 100. And so it's almost impossible to be completely concrete on like, this is how much money I'm going to make from this 56 hours, because so many things could happen to these several hundred items that I'm sending in that all I can do is just basically calculate the potential profit. So if we factor in the hours spent and the potential profit, we come to an hourly of $88 an hour. So that sounds really good. $88 an hour. That's a lot of money. But kind of like the hourly, there's a few other things to calculate in here. Kind of like I was saying earlier, some things don't end up selling for what you list them at. There are also situations where the thing doesn't sell at all. There's also situations where Amazon just straight out loses the item. There are also fixed and variable costs in the business, like for example, paying for 𝗬𝗏 every month, paying for a repricer, paying for the Amazon Seller Central $40 a month, and lots of other costs in the business. Then there's variable costs that come up on a random basis. All of these costs aren't calculated into the profit per hour because I didn't start a new Amazon store in order to do this challenge. You can't just go and start a new Amazon store when you already have one. And especially in the book world, you'll list something for a certain amount of money and oftentimes competition will come in and the price will get lower. That's just a normal part of reselling, and especially in the book world, this happens a lot. The 88 potential profit, the way that it'll stay 88 is if there's some items that go down and there's some items that go up and then a lot of items that stay the same price. And most likely a lot of items will go down. I would still say it is a safe assumption to say I will probably make half of what I send in. And so based on that, it'll end up being more like $44 an hour overall. So $44 an hour, still much better than working fast food, still much better than a lot of jobs out there. So I'm gonna do some calculations out. If this was the only thing I did, how much money I would be making. So if I had the energy and time to do this for 40 hours a week, this would end up being $1,600 of profit per week. which equates to $6,400 profit a month. That is actually over what the average American makes. Pretty solid. This ends up being just a bit over $76,000 per year. So this is higher than what the average American household makes, and that's household. So there are some complete couples together who are making a lot less than this. And so like this is a really, really good option to get you outside of having to work a job. This is a great option to give you the option of being free and working for yourself and being self-employed. There are ways that you can optimize this and hire out certain parts of the business. Especially you could hire out some of the listing, at least in this model. However, though, there is the reality that the likelihood of a reseller who has complete time independence and is able to do what he wants of working 40 hours a week and not less and actually listing all these items is pretty small. So most likely, most resellers aren't going to be working 40 hours a week on their business in a focused, intentional direction like this. All this being considered, I think thrifting and sending the items onto Amazon FBA, it's a really good way to get your foot in the door with reselling. You can make some really good money with it. It is learnable in a smaller amount of time than things like retail arbitrage, online arbitrage, wholesale, or private label. Just the thing is that the ceiling of how much money you can make with this business model is a little bit lower than something like retail arbitrage, online arbitrage, wholesale, or private label. For example, there's only so much that you can optimize in this business model to make over 100K a year. You would have to have your systems really in place, doing really well in order to actually do that, or do something like bulk books where you have consistent supply of books in order to do this really, really well. With something like online arbitrage or wholesale or private label, the ceiling for what you can make is so much higher. And so that is why I continue to do online arbitrage. I want to set really high goals, and then even if I hit half of those goals, I still end up doing better than the person who is just trying to thrift and kind of just make it. So this is my experiment with thrifting for 50 hours. It's a great way to deal with not having much cash flow. If you don't have much cash and a lot of it is spent on your online arbitrage or wholesale and you're kind of just waiting for things to change, doing some thrifting can add some money to your bankroll eventually and can be a really good option. But for me, online arbitrage continues to be the main thing that I do in my business. If this was helpful, then feel free to help me out by subscribing. This was a fun experiment to do, and hope you have a great rest of the day. Take care.